Keanu Reeves had always managed to keep his life remarkably private, despite being one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He didn't seek the spotlight, and he preferred to live without all the attention that came with fame. On this particular afternoon, Keanu found himself at a KFC in Los Angeles, a city that could easily make a person feel like a stranger in their own life. The streets were bustling outside, but inside the restaurant the atmosphere was far more relaxed. It was the kind of place where people were just grabbing a quick bite, sharing a meal with family, or enjoying some downtime after a long day. Keanu wasn't there for anything special. He hadn't been invited to an event or anything like that. He was simply looking for a quiet place to enjoy a meal. With his characteristic quiet demeanor, he slipped into a corner booth, away from the hustle and bustle of the more crowded areas. It was a regular spot for him when he wanted to blend in with the crowd. The last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself. Even though he was used to the occasional look from fans, Keanu liked to feel ordinary, to experience moments where he wasn't seen as Keanu Reeves, the actor, but just as a regular person enjoying a meal. He looked around the small restaurant, taking in the familiar scent of fried chicken, the sound of people talking and laughing, and the hum of the air conditioner. It felt like an ordinary day, one that Keanu could lose himself in. He hadn't been in the mood for anything fancy, just some comfort food. The simplicity of it all gave him a sense of peace. He had been moving from one filming project to another lately, and with all the chaos surrounding him, he found these small moments of solitude to be incredibly valuable. Unbeknownst to Keanu, this particular visit to KFC was going to be anything but ordinary. At a table across the room, two teenage girls sat together, quietly eating their meal. They weren't particularly loud, but they seemed to be talking a lot between themselves, giggling at something. They looked like any other pair of friends enjoying lunch, but there was something different about them that day. One of them, the more observant of the two, glanced up and spotted him. She didn't say anything at first, but her eyes widened slightly as she took in the figure sitting alone in the booth. The other girl, still chatting away, didn't notice at first, but the first girl couldn't help herself. She leaned in, her voice almost a whisper, and said, "I think that's him." The second girl stopped mid-sentence and followed her friend's gaze. Her face changed instantly as she too recognized the man sitting across the room. Keanu had his back to them, so they weren't entirely sure if it was really him. But everything about the way he sat, the way he moved, his unmistakable posture, it all seemed too familiar to be anyone else. They had seen him in movies countless times, so it was hard to ignore the possibility that the person they were staring at was none other than Keanu Reeves. They both paused, unsure of how to react. After a moment of silence, the first girl whispered, "Should we go say hi?" She wasn't sure, but she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside her. She had watched Keanu's movies since she was little, and his kindness had always stood out to her. There was something about him that made him seem so different from other actors. He wasn't like the typical Hollywood star who lived for the spotlight, or who acted like they were untouchable. Keanu was known for his humility and down-to-earth nature, and that made him stand out even more. The second girl hesitated, glancing back at Keanu. "What if it's not him?" she said, her voice tinged with doubt. "I don't want to make a fool of myself." But the first girl was already leaning forward, squinting to get a better look. "No, I'm pretty sure it's him," she said, her excitement building. "Look, he's sitting alone. It has to be him." The two girls exchanged a look. They had been fans of Keanu for years, and they knew this moment was rare. A chance encounter like this didn't come around every day. But still, the idea of actually going up to him, speaking to him, was it the right thing to do? They debated quietly for a few moments. The second girl, after a long pause, sighed and said, "Okay, let's do it. But we have to be respectful. We can't make a scene." With that, they both stood up, their hearts pounding in their chests. They were nervous, but the excitement outweighed their nerves. Slowly, they made their way to Keanu's table, trying to keep their cool and not draw too much attention. As they approached, the first girl took a deep breath and in a soft but steady voice asked, "Excuse me, are you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu looked up, his face breaking into a kind, warm smile. It was a genuine, friendly smile, the kind he had become known for. He didn't hesitate, didn't show any signs of annoyance. In fact, he seemed almost relieved to be spoken to so calmly. Keanu nodded and said, "Yes, I am." The girl stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. It was one of those situations where you had so many things you wanted to say, but suddenly everything felt like it was too much. Keanu, sensing their hesitation, gave them a reassuring smile and said, "It's nice to meet you both. How are you doing?" This simple, polite gesture broke the ice completely. The girls, realizing that he was exactly as kind and down-to-earth as they had hoped, felt more at ease. They began to tell him how much they admired his work, how they had watched his films over and over, and how his characters had inspired them in ways they couldn't fully explain. Keanu nodded, listening intently, as if he truly cared about what they were saying. His presence, so warm and inviting, made the girls feel like they were talking to an old friend, not the famous actor they had grown up watching on screen. For a few moments, the world seemed to disappear. It was just the three of them, two young fans and the actor who had shaped so many of their childhood memories. But even in the midst of this perfect moment, something felt a little strange. Keanu, ever the humble soul, didn't want to draw attention to himself. He didn't want the girls to feel uncomfortable, nor did he want to feel like they were just excited to meet him because of his fame. But still, he could sense there was something more that they wanted to say. Something deeper than just compliments. He waited patiently, giving them the space they needed to find the words. And that was when it happened. The second girl, who had been quiet up until that point, suddenly spoke. "Keanu," she said softly, almost as if she was speaking more to herself than to him. "I don't think you understand just how much you've meant to us. You probably hear this from a lot of people, but your movies, they helped us through some really hard times." Keanu, who had been listening intently, felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't expected such honesty, such vulnerability. But the girl wasn't done yet. "My sister and I, we lost our mom last year. It was the hardest thing we've ever gone through. We didn't know how to cope, but your films, your kindness, it gave us something to hold on to. You don't even know, but you helped us more than you'll ever know." The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Keanu's face softened and he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't prepared for this kind of moment, and yet it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in a long time. The girl's raw honesty and deep pain hit him in a way he couldn't describe. It was as if all the pain and loss she felt had somehow been shared with him in those few simple words. Keanu didn't know how to respond at first. He wasn't someone who was used to having such personal and heartfelt conversations with strangers, especially not in a place as simple as a KFC. But he knew one thing for sure. This was a moment he would never forget. The moment hung in the air, thick with emotion. Keanu was still processing what the girl had said. The words hit him harder than he expected, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. He had heard many fans express their appreciation for his movies before, but this felt different. This wasn't just admiration for his acting. It was something deeper, something more personal. The girls were watching him closely now, waiting for a response, but neither of them expected what would happen next. Keanu took a deep breath, his gaze softening. He wiped his eyes quickly, not wanting to make it too obvious that he was moved by their words. But it was clear. The kindness in their voices and the sincerity in their eyes had touched something deep within him. I'm so sorry for your loss," Keanu said quietly, his voice filled with empathy. He paused for a moment before adding, "It's hard to lose someone you love, especially someone who meant so much to you. I can't imagine what you've been through." The girls didn't know what to say. It was rare for them to meet someone who understood their pain, especially someone who had so many people looking up to him. They had heard stories of Keanu's kindness before, stories of him giving away money, helping people in need and showing kindness to strangers, but hearing him speak so genuinely, without any pretense, made them feel understood in a way they hadn't felt in a long time. Keanu, always someone who valued honesty, seemed to sense that this conversation was important. He wanted to say something that would make the girls feel better, but not in a way that would seem forced. He wasn't one to offer empty words. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He just wanted to let them know that he cared, that he understood the pain they were carrying. "I know that sometimes it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're going through something like this," Keanu continued. "But just know that you're not alone. The people around you, the things you love, they can help you find your way. And sometimes things can get better even when you least expect it." There was a long pause, The girls exchanged glances, not sure what to say next. But there was something in Keanu's words that made them feel like they weren't alone anymore. It wasn't just a random actor giving them a pat on the back. It was Keanu Reeves, someone who had clearly been through his own share of hardships. Speaking from a place of experience, Keanu gave them both a soft smile, the kind of smile that made you feel like you could trust him, like you could tell him anything. "You know," he said, "sometimes it's the small things that get us through the tough times. A good book, a favorite song, or even just a moment of quiet can help, and when you feel lost, that's okay. It's part of being human. We all go through it." The girls felt their eyes start to well up, but they quickly blinked back the tears. It was so rare to meet someone who not only understood their pain, but was willing to talk about it in such an open and honest way. It was like a weight had been lifted from their shoulders just by hearing him say those words. After a brief silence, Keanu looked at them again, his expression warm and kind. "I know it's not easy, but you'll find your way through. You have each other, and that's something really special. You have your memories, and you have the strength to keep going." The first girl, who had been quieter throughout the conversation, felt her throat tighten as she listened to him. She had never imagined that one day she would be sitting at a table in a fast food restaurant, talking to the man who had inspired her so much in her own life. And here he was, not only listening to her but offering wisdom and comfort in a way that felt genuine and real. The second girl, still processing everything, managed to say, "Thank you, really. You don't know how much this means to us. We've both been struggling, and hearing you say that, it gives us hope." Her voice was soft but steady now, and Keanu could tell that his words had made a real impact. Keanu smiled again, his eyes kind, though they carried the weight of someone who had seen both the beauty and the darkness in life. "I'm glad I could be here for you today," he said, his voice steady. "I may not have all the answers, but sometimes just being present is enough. Just knowing you're not alone, that's what matters." The girls sat there for a few moments, taking in everything he had said. There was a silence between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was a quiet, shared moment of understanding, a recognition that they had just experienced something incredibly special. They weren't just fans meeting their idol. They were two young women who had been through something difficult, and they had just found some comfort in the words of someone they admired deeply. Keanu could see that the girls were still processing everything, so he gave them a little space. He knew how overwhelming it could be to hear words of kindness in moments of pain. He didn't want to rush them. Instead, he continued to eat his meal quietly, letting the conversation flow at its own pace. It was in these simple moments of humanity that Keanu felt most at peace, the unspoken connection between people who understood each other, even if they had never met before. After a few minutes, the second girl spoke up again, her voice a little more confident this time. "Keanu, we just wanted to tell you how much your work has meant to us. You've always been different from other actors. You seem so real and kind. It's rare to see someone who isn't caught up in the fame or the fortune. You've always seemed like you care about the right things." Keanu looked at her, his gaze thoughtful. "You know," he said softly, "I don't think fame is what matters. It's the connections we make with people, the moments of kindness we share. That's what stays with you. Fame is fleeting, but the way you treat people, that's what lasts. That's what I try to focus on." The girls nodded, taking his words to heart. It wasn't lost on them that Keanu's success had never been about the money or the fame. It was about something much more genuine. In a world that often celebrated superficiality, Keanu stood as a beacon of authenticity. He didn't need to show off or boast about his achievements. He let his actions and his kindness speak for themselves. As they sat together in that small KFC, the conversation drifted to other things. They talked about their favorite movies, their shared love of music, and the little things that brought them joy. For those few minutes, they weren't just fans meeting a celebrity. They were two people connecting with someone who had touched their lives in ways they couldn't fully explain. Keanu continued to listen, offering the occasional piece of advice or insight, but mostly he just let them talk. It was clear to him that they needed this moment, this connection, and he was grateful to be a part of it, even if just for a short time. When it came time for them to leave, the girls thanked Keanu once again, their gratitude sincere. Keanu stood up with them, and as they said their goodbyes, he gave them both a warm hug, something so simple but so meaningful. It was a gesture of kindness that they would never forget. "You two take care of yourselves," Keanu said with a gentle smile. And remember, you're stronger than you think. As the girls walked out of the restaurant, they couldn't believe what had just happened. It was a moment that would stay with them forever. They had met Keanu Reeves, yes, but more than that, they had experienced a rare moment of real human connection. And for them, that meant more than anything else. The door to the KFC swung open as the two girls stepped outside, the cool breeze of the late afternoon brushing against their faces. They hadn't expected the encounter with Keanu to leave such a lasting impact. They'd met celebrities before, admired their work from afar, but this was something else entirely. As they walked down the sidewalk, they found themselves replaying every moment of their conversation with him, trying to make sense of how something so unexpected had made them feel so understood. The first girl, who had been quieter throughout the conversation, finally spoke, her voice a little shaky. "I can't believe that just happened. I still feel like I'm dreaming." Her friend, the second girl, nodded in agreement, her eyes wide with disbelief. "I know, right? It wasn't like meeting a celebrity, though. It felt real, like he actually cared about what we were saying." "I know. That's what hit me the most," the first girl replied. "I've always admired his movies, but I never thought he'd be like that. He was just so kind. I mean, he didn't act like he was doing us a favor by talking to us. He was really listening." They continued to walk, but now their pace had slowed. The world around them seemed quieter somehow, as if the conversation they had shared with Keanu had changed the way they viewed everything, even if just for a moment. The second girl turned to her friend, a thoughtful look on her face. "I keep thinking about what he said, about how things can get better when you least expect it. Maybe he's right. Maybe we've been so focused on the past that we haven't allowed ourselves to look forward to the future." Her friend smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread inside her. "I think I needed to hear that. Maybe we can't always control what happens, but we can choose how we respond. I mean, he's been through his own struggles, and still he's trying to help others. He's not just talking about hope, he's living it." The conversation continued as they made their way down the street, but in the back of their minds, they both kept returning to Keanu's words. His kindness, his quiet wisdom, it all seemed to resonate with them in a way they couldn't explain. Later that evening, as the girls sat together in their living room, they still couldn't stop talking about their encounter. It wasn't just that they had met a celebrity, it was that Keanu had made them feel like they mattered. He hadn't brushed them off or treated them like just another fan. He had listened, really listened, and in doing so, he had given them something they hadn't realized they were missing: hope. "I keep thinking about how he said we're not alone," the second girl said, her voice soft as she glanced out the window. "It's like, sometimes I forget that. We get so caught up in our own heads thinking no one understands, but really, we're all going through stuff. He made me feel like I'm not the only one struggling." Her friend nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Yeah, it's easy to forget that everyone has their own battles. You think people like Keanu have it all together, but he's been through stuff too. And hearing him say that things can get better, even when it feels impossible, it just made me believe it could happen for us too." The conversation drifted into silence as they both reflected on what Keanu had shared with them. In that moment, it wasn't just the famous actor they had met. It was a man who had opened up and shared a piece of his own heart. The connection they felt was undeniable, and it lingered long after they had parted ways. For Keanu, the interaction had been just as meaningful. After the girls left, he sat back in his booth, taking a few quiet moments to gather his thoughts. His meal was long finished, but he wasn't in any rush to leave. He had seen enough in his life to know that moments like this were rare. To have someone open up so honestly, to have them share their pain and their hope, it was a reminder that we're all connected by the human experience. He wasn't used to talking about his own struggles in public, but in that moment, with those two girls, it felt like the right thing to do. It wasn't about his fame or his career. It was about being real, being present, and offering a bit of comfort to people who needed it. Keanu had always believed that small acts of kindness could have a ripple effect, and he hoped that the conversation he had shared with the girls would make a difference in their lives, even if just for a little while. As he sat in the booth, Keanu thought back to his own life, the losses, the challenges, the times when everything seemed too difficult to bear. He had learned over the years that those moments of struggle didn't define him, but how he responded to them did. And maybe, just maybe, he had been able to share a little of that perspective with the girls. It wasn't about offering grand solutions or easy answers. It was about offering support and understanding when it was needed most. The next day, the girls woke up with a sense of clarity they hadn't felt in a long time. They had been carrying so much weight, emotional pain, grief, and doubt, but something had shifted in them. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but there was a noticeable difference in the way they approached the day. They felt a little lighter, a little more hopeful, and they both knew why. The second girl, who had been struggling the most, picked up her phone and sent a message to her sister. It had been a while since they'd really talked about their feelings, and today, she felt ready to open up. "Hey," she typed, "I met someone yesterday who helped me see things differently. Keanu Reeves. I know it sounds crazy, but he said some stuff that really hit me. I think we need to focus on the good things, on the things we can control, instead of just holding on to the bad stuff. I don't know if it makes sense, but I want to try. I want us to try." She hit send, then put her phone down, feeling both nervous and relieved. A few moments later, her sister replied, "I know exactly what you mean. I've been thinking about the same things. Let's do it. Let's keep going no matter what." It wasn't an instant fix, and there would still be tough days ahead, but the girls felt like they had taken a step toward healing. They were no longer trapped by the pain of the past. They were ready to start moving forward. And in some strange way, meeting Keanu had helped them realize that they didn't have to do it alone. As for Keanu, he continued with his day, but the encounter stayed with him. He was used to people recognizing him on the streets, but this was different. It wasn't just another interaction. It was a reminder that kindness had the power to change lives. And for a brief moment, he had been able to be a part of that change. He didn't know what would come of that conversation in KFC, but he didn't need to. What mattered was that for a few minutes, he had connected with two people who needed it. And in the end, that was enough. A week had passed since the chance encounter at the KFC. The girls, though still processing everything that had happened, felt different. It wasn't just because they'd met someone famous, someone they'd admired for so long. It was because that brief conversation with Keanu had left a mark on them. It had opened their eyes to a different way of looking at their lives and their struggles. The first girl woke up that morning feeling an unusual sense of peace. The weight of the past week, the pain, the sadness, seemed a little lighter today. It was as if the words Keanu had shared with them had settled deep within her, making it easier to take each day one step at a time. She had been overwhelmed for so long, but now she felt ready to face the world again. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her friend, the second girl. She smiled when she saw the message and immediately opened it. "Hey, I've been thinking about something. I know things aren't perfect, but we've got each other, and we can keep going. We've got more strength than we think." The first girl couldn't help but smile at the message. Her friend's words were a reminder of everything Keanu had said, the importance of connection, of moving forward, and of finding strength in the people around them. She replied quickly, "Yes, we do. We've got this. Let's keep pushing, no matter what." She felt a sense of warmth spread inside her as she hit send. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't walking that road alone. Meanwhile, across town, Keanu was walking through a quiet park. It was early in the morning, and the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over everything. It was his favorite time of day, before the world got busy, when everything felt calm and still. As he walked, he thought back to the girls he had met at KFC. He hadn't expected that brief exchange to stay with him, but it had. In the days following their meeting, Keanu couldn't help but think about the way they had opened up to him, how vulnerable they had been, and how much courage it took to share their pain with a complete stranger. He admired them for that. It reminded him of the times in his own life when he had felt lost, unsure of where to turn, but somehow, he had always found a way through. He thought about his own family, the people he had loved and lost, the quiet moments of grief that no one saw. In the years since, he had learned that healing didn't happen all at once. It took time, it took patience, and it took a willingness to keep moving forward, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. As Keanu continued his walk, he remembered a lesson he had learned long ago, the power of small acts of kindness. He didn't need to be the center of attention or make grand gestures to make a difference. Sometimes simply being present for someone, offering a kind word or listening when they needed to talk was enough. And that was why, even after all these years, He never grew tired of meeting people, because he knew that every connection had the potential to make the world a little better. The girls, too, were starting to realize this. They had spent the last few days reflecting on everything Keanu had said, and as they did, they felt the urge to reach out to others. They had spent so much time focused on their own struggles, but now they understood the value of extending a little kindness to those around them. They had been given a gift, hope, and they wanted to share that gift with others. One afternoon, the first girl was walking home from the grocery store when she noticed a woman struggling to carry a heavy bag. Without thinking, she rushed over to help. The woman looked up, surprised, but gratefully accepted the offer. "Thank you so much," the woman said, smiling warmly. "I've been carrying this for what feels like forever." "No problem," the first girl replied. "I know how it feels. I've had days when even the little things feel like too much." The woman's eyes softened as she nodded. "It's good to know that there are still kind people out there," she said. "It's easy to feel like everyone's just rushing through life, but sometimes a small gesture can make a big difference." The first girl smiled, feeling a sense of connection to the woman. It was a simple act, but it made her feel like she was part of something bigger, something that went beyond her own pain and struggles. That evening, the second girl had a similar experience. She was sitting at a cafe sipping her coffee when she noticed a man sitting alone at a table nearby. He looked a little down, staring into his cup as if lost in thought. For a moment she debated whether to say anything, but then she remembered the words Keanu had shared with them. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about being present. She took a deep breath and walked over to him. "Hey," she said gently. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that I hope you're doing okay. Sometimes we all need a little reminder that it's all right to take a break and breathe." The man looked up, surprised, but then smiled. "Thank you. I didn't expect that, but I appreciate it." They talked for a few minutes, and the conversation was simple but meaningful. The second girl realized that sometimes just showing that you care could make a difference. It didn't have to be a huge act. It could be as small as offering a kind word to someone who needed it. The girls continued to find moments like these, where small acts of kindness became their way of spreading the hope they had received from Keanu. It wasn't about fixing everything or making the world perfect. It was about acknowledging that everyone was going through something, and sometimes the best thing we could do was show up for each other. A few weeks later, the girls decided to visit the park, the same one where Keanu had been walking the morning they met. They didn't expect to see him again, but they wanted to honor the feeling he had given them. They found a bench near the trees, and as they sat down, they started to talk about everything that had changed since that day. "I feel like I'm seeing things differently now," the first girl said, her voice thoughtful. "I've been focusing on all the things I don't have, all the things I've lost, but there's so much more in my life that I'm grateful for. Like this moment right now, being here with you, with a clear mind and a little hope. It's more than I could have asked for." Her friend nodded. "I feel the same way. I've been trying to take things one step at a time, to not let the bad days define me. I know it's not always easy, but I think we're getting there." The girls sat there for a while, soaking in the calm of the park and the warmth of the sunlight. They had come so far in such a short amount of time, but they knew there was still work to be done. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but they had learned to find beauty in the small moments, in the connections that mattered. As they got up to leave, the first girl looked over at her friend and smiled. "We've got this. We don't need to have all the answers, but we've got each other, and that's enough." The second girl grinned, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. "Yeah, we've got this." And as they walked away, they couldn't help but feel that the journey they had started that day in the KFC was just beginning. There was still a lot to learn, and there would be tough times ahead. But for the first time in a long time, they felt ready to face whatever came next. And somewhere deep down, they both knew that the kindness they had shared with others and the kindness they had received would always guide them, no matter where life took them. Months passed since that fateful day at the KFC, and for the two girls, life was beginning to feel different. The challenges they once faced seemed a little easier to bear. They had slowly started rebuilding their sense of hope, and in doing so had found themselves helping others along the way. They weren't the same people they had been when they first met Keanu. They were stronger, more aware of their own power to make a difference, and more open to the kindness of the world around them. It wasn't always easy, though. The past was still there, lurking in the background, waiting for a chance to pull them back down. There were days when the weight of old wounds seemed too much to carry, when the world felt too big and uncertain. But it was on those days, the difficult days, when they remembered the conversation with Keanu the most. His words, his quiet strength, had planted seeds of change in their hearts. And even when they struggled, they never forgot the lesson. Things could get better, and they didn't have to face it alone. One afternoon, the first girl was sitting in her living room, scrolling through her phone. She had been going through old pictures, reminiscing about how much her life had changed. She came across a photo from a few months ago before they'd met Keanu, when things felt darker, more hopeless. She remembered how at that time, she could barely get out of bed some mornings, overwhelmed by the weight of everything. But now she was getting better. Slowly but surely. Her phone buzzed with a message from her friend. She smiled as she read it. "Hey, I'm thinking of doing something today. Want to join me?" The first girl texted back quickly, her fingers flying over the screen. "Of course, what are you planning?" The second girl replied with a few words that made the first girl's heart flutter. "I want to go back to the KFC. I think it's time we say thank you to Keanu for everything he did for us." The first girl felt a rush of emotion at the thought. It had been a while since that day, but the memory was still vivid in her mind. The kindness, the way Keanu had listened, the feeling of hope he had given them, all of it had stayed with them. She quickly typed back, "Yes, let's do it." And so a few hours later, the girls found themselves standing outside the KFC, the familiar scent of fried chicken filling the air. The restaurant looked the same as it had the day they met Keanu. The same simple sign, the same glass doors. But everything felt different to them now. They walked inside, their hearts beating faster as they scanned the tables, hoping to see him again. But Keanu wasn't there. They took a seat at one of the booths near the window, glancing at each other, both a little disappointed but also understanding. "Well, I guess he's not here," the first girl said, her voice tinged with a little sadness. The second girl nodded, but there was no defeat in her tone. "It's okay. He doesn't need to be here for us to say thank you. We're here because of him, because he helped us realize that we don't have to be stuck." Just then, the waitress came over, a friendly smile on her face. "Can I get you girls something to eat?" They ordered their usual meals, but neither of them was really hungry. They were there for something deeper. As they ate, they reflected on everything that had happened in their lives since meeting Keanu. The changes, the challenges, and the small victories they had celebrated along the way. The first girl sighed, leaning back in her seat. "You know, I still think about that day. I wonder if Keanu knows how much he changed our lives. I mean, he probably has no idea, right? It was just a random moment for him, but it was everything for us." The second girl looked thoughtful. "Yeah, I don't think he realizes how big of an impact he had. But that's the thing, isn't it? He wasn't trying to change our lives. He was just being himself. And sometimes that's all it takes. Just showing up, being real, offering a little kindness. That's all it really takes to make a difference." The first girl smiled softly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I think you're right. He didn't have to say a lot. He just had to be there, listen, and show us that things could get better." As they finished their meals, the two girls sat in silence for a while, just enjoying each other's company. They hadn't needed to say much. Everything they felt had already been communicated in the quiet understanding between them. They were both different now, stronger, more aware of the importance of kindness and more determined to keep moving forward. The next day, the girls went to a local community center, eager to volunteer. They had made a pact that they would give back, just as Keanu had unknowingly given to them. They knew they had been blessed, and it was time to pass that blessing along to others. When they arrived, they met with a coordinator who explained what needed to be done, helping organize donations, serving meals, and offering support to those who were struggling. It wasn't easy work, but it felt good. There was something powerful about being part of a community, something comforting about knowing that everyone was working together for a common purpose. As they helped out, the girls realized something. They didn't need to wait for the perfect moment to make a difference. They didn't need to meet a celebrity or have some grand event happen. Sometimes it was the small things that mattered most, the smile you gave a stranger, the way you listened to someone who needed to talk, or simply being there for someone in their time of need. That afternoon, they served lunch to a group of people who had come to the center for a meal. As the girls handed out plates, one woman stopped them, looking at them with curious eyes. "You two seem different," the woman said, her voice soft. "You have a kindness about you. What changed?" The girls exchanged a quick glance, then the second girl spoke. "We met someone who showed us that things can get better, even when life feels impossible. It was just a small moment, but it made a huge difference." The woman nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I can see it in you. You're spreading that same kindness. That's how things change." The girls didn't know how to respond at first. They hadn't realized it, but the woman had put into words what they had been feeling all along. They were spreading the kindness they had received, and in doing so, they were making the world just a little bit better. As the day came to a close, the girls sat together, reflecting on everything they had experienced. They had come a long way, and though they knew they still had plenty of growing to do, they felt at peace with where they were. They had started this journey not knowing where it would lead, but now they understood something important. Life wasn't about waiting for everything to be perfect. It was about showing up, being kind, and keeping hope alive, even when things felt uncertain. As they parted ways that evening, the first girl sent a message to her friend. "Thank you for everything, for helping me believe that things could get better." Her friend's reply came quickly. "Thank you for being by my side. We've got this no matter what." And in that moment, they both knew they had everything they needed to keep moving forward. Because no matter how hard life got, they would always have each other, and the kindness that had brought them back to life.